Hello, everyone. My name is Alaina G. Levine, and I'm president of Quantum Success Solutions. I'm also author of the multiverse best-selling book, Networking for Nerds, and I'm delighted and honored today to speak with you about science communications careers. And I want to express my appreciation to the American Geophysical Union for their support of this webinar and other career development and professional advancement resources and opportunities for geoscientists and the larger STEM community. They're the ones that provide this type of opportunity for you, so I think it's terrific to give them a standing ovation. Yes, we're all doing that right now. Today's webinar, which we're going to be focusing on relating to science communications careers, is being recorded. It will be posted on the AGU Career Center website in the near future, so you'll be able to take advantage of that. If you have any questions, please put them in the questions section of the dashboard you have for your webinar, or you can email me as we conclude. And I want to start off, first of all, I'm going to give you the Twitter handle because you can feel free to live tweet this talk at the AGU and at Alaina G. Levine. Those are the two strategic Twitter handles. And I want to go back to this very first slide here and draw your attention to the picture there. So that's a picture of me that's a few years old. I'm still just as gorgeous, and I know that was something that was of utmost importance in your mind today as we started, so I just wanted to be clear about that. But this picture was taken at Biosphere 2, which is this really amazing, it's completely unique institution that's part of the University of Arizona. It's north of Tucson, Arizona. I live in Tucson. And the Biosphere 2 is actually now a living laboratory associated with ecology and geoscience and hydrology and atmospheric sciences and atmospheric chemistry and all sorts of areas associated with climate and climate change and climate research. And where I'm standing right there, I was standing on a new type of particular experiment that the Biosphere 2 was launching, which is called Landscape Evolution Observatory. And it's basically these enormous two-story high hill slopes that we're going to, that now today have lots and lots of dirt and soil put on them and thousands of sensors. And you can see in the background some of the sensors popping up out of the dirt there, out of the soil, I should say, with tennis balls attached to them. And I was actually one of the last humans, apparently, to be able to walk on this soil before it became an active experiment, and now nobody will ever walk on it again. And I was there reporting on this Landscape Evolution Observatory for a magazine called Cosmos, which is a science magazine based in Australia. And I was really excited about this. And the reason why I wanted to bring this to your attention is because this was a job that I got. This was an assignment that I got as a science journalist. And I'm going to go into a lot of detail about the different types of communications careers, ways to pitch editors, how to prepare for your career, and so on and so forth. But I really want to emphasize that the reason I got this assignment was because of a couple of things. Number one, I knew what was in the region around where I live. I took advantage of geographically located resources. And by the way, if you're not hearing anything, please just log out and re-log in, and you will be able to hear me, I promise. What I was saying was that I took advantage of the resources or the opportunities that were regionally located near me that were unique. In this case, Biosphere 2 is unique to pitch that as a potential article to magazines that don't necessarily have reporters who have access to that. So Cosmos, being in Australia, they don't necessarily have an Australian reporter or an Australian editor that lives in Tucson, Arizona, or they don't necessarily even have the funds to send a reporter to Biosphere 2. But because I am here in Tucson and I am essentially down the street from Biosphere 2, and I had an idea, and I had been paying attention to what Biosphere 2 was doing in terms of this building of this massive experiment, I was able to actually pitch it to Cosmos. So I took advantage of the resources that were located near me, that were local to me, that I knew about. I also, because I had worked for the University of Arizona for many years, I knew all the players, I knew the scientists, I knew the decision makers. So I was able to present that to the editor as a way to get in, that I could easily get in, and I knew how to get in, and I knew who to speak to and who the experts were. And the other really important aspect of this assignment that I wanted to emphasize to you is, how did I get this job at all? The reason I got it was because I went to a conference, the National Association of Science Writers, which is the main organization in the United States, although they have members worldwide, and there are other worldwide organizations, and I'm going to tell you about those later. That's specifically for the science writing and science communications community. I went to that conference, and in fact it just happened to be, I believe, in Flagstaff that year. It was 2011, and I was sitting at lunch next to the editor-in-chief of Cosmos magazine, this Australian magazine. He had come all the way from Australia to attend this conference because he knew that this would be a good place for him to network, for him to find talent, for him to find new writers, new collaborators, and new ideas that he could put into his magazine that were not available to him necessarily at other conferences or at other locations. And so I ended up sitting next to this gentleman, and we were chatting, and I said, I'm based in Tucson. He said, oh, what's going on in Tucson? I said, well, you know, we have Biosphere 2. It's a living laboratory. It's completely covered by glass. It's acres and acres big, and they're about to start this huge climate change, climate analysis experiment where they're going to be looking at water going down hill slopes and what this means in terms of the atmosphere and the changing of the chemistry and all these things, and it's a really interesting project, and I'd love to write about it for you. And he said, that is something we do not have in Australia. That is something that is completely unique. Send me your pitch. And I sent him my pitch a couple of weeks later, and a few months after that, or a few weeks after that, I found myself on that hill slope with that cute hat, with my little reporter's notebook, which is in one of my hands there, reporting on the story, and then later I was writing up the story. So the networking at the conference was absolutely the linchpin. That was how I got the job. I took what I knew, I took my experience, I took the aspect of the access that I had and the knowledge that I had, and then I seized the opportunity to network with that editor at that moment, to share with him something that would be valuable to him and would be unique, that he would not be able to find anywhere else. And as a result, I got a job. And that led to a second job, and that led to other jobs. And that's the beauty of science communications, particularly with freelance positions. And I'm going to tell you more about that in a little bit. But I just wanted to give you an idea of what you can do, particularly with the networking side of things, that there's really a lot of opportunities if you really look for them, if you seize the opportunity, and if you network. So our plan for today is we're going to do an overview of the landscape of science communications careers. I really want to spend a bit of time talking about the skills that are needed to be successful, both in the craft of communicating and the business of communicating and the business of building your career. I want to talk about different types of careers you can pursue, how you actually launch your career, and the different resources that are required or can be useful for you in pursuing your career. Now, a little bit more about me. You're probably thinking, Alaina, what kind of science communications do you do after all? I mean, you mentioned that you do science journalism. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself and the kinds of things that I do. So I run a company, Quantum Success Solutions, and I use that as a platform to do lots of different types of science communications. And quite honestly, you will find that most science communicators who run their own business, as opposed to being staff science communicators working for an institution, which, by the way, is an absolutely amazing career that you can access and pursue, and we're going to talk about that in a few moments. But the ones who work freelance, basically they're running a business, and they often do many different types of science communications tasks. They may have many different types of science communications projects and responsibilities, and that's the case with me as well. So one area that I focus on for my company is science journalism. So I write articles about different types of science and engineering topics and related topics, such as science careers topics, for different magazines. For example, I write for Science, I write for Physics Today, I've written for Physics World, I've written for Cosmos, I've written for Scientific American, Smithsonian, I've written for Nature, and lots of other magazines, and newsletters and different types of publications as well. And this is science journalism in that I am writing, reporting a story that actually exists as opposed to fiction writing, and I'm reporting it in an objective way for this publication, as opposed to working for an institution and writing a press release for that institution. So this science journalism is, I do it online, I do it for publications that are in print, and I do it for other types of publications as well. I also pursue what I call private client science writing opportunities, which is where I'm working for an institution or an organization or a think tank or a company, and I'm doing different types of science writing. It could be writing articles for that association, like I've written articles For example, for the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, ASME, their website, I've written articles for their website for many years. And that's kind of like science journalism, but since I'm writing for the association and that association is publishing it, I call it private client science writing. I've also written pieces, articles, content, whatever you want to call it, for the Hispanic Scholarship Fund. I've written for the Science and Technology Policy Institute, which is essentially a think tank in Washington, D.C. that does all sorts of different science policy topics and pursues different science policy projects. I've written for other types of associations. I've written for other types of companies. And this is something that I really enjoy because it's very creative. You get a chance to work with different types of clients, different types of people, and it really is a lot of fun. I also do a lot of speaking. So I do science communications in that I give speeches, I give workshops. I'm giving this webinar right now, mostly in the science careers space. So helping scientists, engineers, people who are nerds like me, people who have that science and engineering background, transition their career, move their career forward in any way that they want. And so I'm giving talks about those things. And as it's totally clear, I'm also a very clever comedian. So I engage in actually what's called corporate comedy. So I don't do stand-up comedy, but I do corporate comedy, which is where an organization, a conference, a company, some sort of institution will hire me to come to that institution to deliver a speech, a workshop, do some sort of professional speaking engagement, and I'm incorporating humor associated with that climate, with that culture, with that organization into the speech, into the workshop, into the engagement, and that's called corporate comedy. There's other types of corporate comedy as well, but because I tend to work mostly with scientists and engineers, my corporate comedy is all focused in on the science and engineering community. So I'm engaging the community by writing jokes and incorporating humor that is specifically relevant to that audience. I also do communications coaching and consulting and training, so helping people, particularly scientists and engineers, throughout their different phases of their career with speaking, with public speaking, with giving talks, with giving posters, and with writing. I do one-on-one career consulting. Of course, I write books. I should say I write books. I've written one book, and I've edited another book. In the past, I've also done public relations, and I've done outreach. So you see, I have this diversity of things that I do currently right now in my career, and you know what? Tomorrow, I might add something else to that, and the next day, I might add something else to that too. So it changes year to year, and that's another thing that I really like about my personal science communications career is the diversity of it and the fact that it is in flux. It changes regularly, it changes constantly, and that keeps me from being bored. So if you're a person who doesn't want to do the same thing every single day and likes to keep your fingers in a number of different pies and likes a diversity of projects, diversity of collaborators, diversity of bosses, and a diversity of skills that you would use to pursue those projects and work with those collaborators, then a freelance career, and in more generalized, a science communications career is a great option for you, because even if you are on a staff as a science communicator, whether you're a science journalist on staff or you're working in public relations on staff at a university, for example, every day is still different. And, you know, I started my career and working for a university. So let me back up a little bit and just tell you a little bit about my career progression so you know how I got to where I am today. You know, my degree is in mathematics. I have another degree in anthropology, both from the University of Arizona. I first came to the U of A to study physics and astronomy. I was going to be an astrophysicist. But at some point early in my undergraduate education, I realized that what I do not like to do is scientific research. I don't like to do the scientific research. And then I started to think, well, where else could I do with my love of science? Because I truly loved science, and I still love it, and I truly love mathematics. And I ended up switching my degree to mathematics because I just love the elegance of numbers, but I stayed with it, and I continued with it, and I wasn't sure exactly what I could do with it, but I pursued opportunities where I got to do things that I loved, and that included quote-unquote science communications, but I didn't realize that's what I was doing. So, for example, I was the president of the Society of Physics Students at the University of Arizona, where I was organizing events and doing outreach and giving training and doing speeches and doing tours for visitors to the physics department, that's all under science communications, but I didn't even realize that's what that was. I just was doing stuff that I loved to do. And that's a really important aspect of any type of career development and career planning, is start by doing what you love and then figuring out how you could potentially use that to build a career, or how you could use that as a foundation to build your career, or how you could potentially sell that as a way to make money, right? Well, I didn't realize that this was a job until my senior year when I worked as the assistant. I got a job in the physics department also because they knew me. I got a job as the student assistant to the director of communications in the physics department. And that person, the director of communications, her job was basically doing all sorts of science communications on behalf of the physics department. So she designed the website, she kept it up to date, she designed and edited and wrote for the newsletter, which went out 3 to 4 times a year. She gave tours, she did alumni relations, she did fundraising, she did all sorts of different types of science communications. And as I worked for her as her student, I realized this is what I love to do. This is what I want to do. And now I finally have a vocabulary term to call it. It's called science communications. And the universe is a funny thing. And as I was graduating with my math degree, not sure exactly how I would get a job or what I would do, this person that I was working for, my boss, left her position. And her position was vacant. I was graduating, and I applied for her job. And because the physics department head knew me, he gave me her position. He took a chance on me, and it changed the course of my life. So my very first job as I graduated was director of communications for the physics department. And I really just milked that job as much as I possibly could. I put as much into it as I could, and I took as much out of it as I could. I used every skill I could. I took every advantage of every opportunity to advance my skills, to do other types of communications, outreach events, special trainings, again, alumni relations, fundraising, special tours, all sorts of different things, putting together awards packets, expanding the newsletter, expanding the website, and so on and so forth. And after that, I got a job with the dean of the College of Science, doing similar things, but more focused on another type of program. And I was able to expand my career from that. And on the side, that whole time while I was working for the U of A, I was also doing freelance writing. So I kept that up so that I could continue contributing to other types of publications while I had my day job. And in 2009, when I left the U of A to concentrate fully on my company, I had already lined up a number of different opportunities for myself so that I was ready to go. So that's how I got my start, by working for the U of A and by simultaneously pursuing a parallel track of freelance opportunities, which I'm going to talk to you more about how you can pursue. So let's talk, so that's my background. That's where I am coming from. And I'm so appreciative. I want you to know that I am so appreciative of the opportunities that I have, that I've had, that I have now, that I will have in the future. I'm so appreciative of the precious gift that I have been given to be able to be a science communicator, because again, I truly love science. I love communicating science's value. I love communicating and helping others understand why they should pursue science and why they should conduct scientific research. I just personally do not want to do the research itself. I want to write about it. I want to speak about it. I want to communicate it to others and engage them and build advocacy and build advocates for science. But I don't want to be the one who does the scientific research. And it was really good that I was able to figure that part out early in my career. And so I want you to be aware as you're planning your career out, if you find that what you enjoy more is talking with other people or writing about your science for other audiences, as opposed to actually being in the lab or being in the field or being in the research group, then science communications may just be the career for you. So the landscape as we pursue a science communications career or multiple science communications careers, the landscape you need to be thinking about is that networking is going to be your ticket in. You need to be establishing win-win, mutually beneficial partnerships with editors, with collaborators, with potential supervisors, with potential people that you could partner with in different types of institutions, both in publications as well as public relations professionals who can give you ideas for articles. But it is all about the win-win. It's not me trying to get something from an editor. It's me trying to build a relationship with that editor where I could potentially provide her with some value in the form of an article, in the form of information, in the form of expertise that will add value to their publication, and vice versa. She would provide me value with an opportunity, with advice, with information as to how I can improve on my writing, and so on and so forth. That's what networking is. Like, you know, many of you know I talk a lot about networking. I wrote a book, Networking for Nerds. It's not about me mining your brain for a job. It's not me trying to get something from that editor. It's me trying to add value to that organization, to that publication, to that institution. How can I make a difference? And that's the key. Now, since there are jobs, and there are jobs that are advertised, but the reality is that they are few and far between. Most jobs that you will get, most staff jobs and most freelance positions or gigs, you've heard that term, they're hidden. They are only accessed through networking, through me and you having a conversation, just like that editor of Cosmos that I was networking with at the Science Writers Conference, and they're created in the moment in which you and I are chatting. So, you know, it might be an opportunity that doesn't even exist yet, and because you and I are having a conversation, maybe at the conference, maybe we meet at a conference, maybe we meet at AGU, for example, at the fall meeting, we start having a conversation, we continue that over email, maybe we have a follow-up Skype appointment, we start to get to know each other, what our value is that we could provide the other party, and pretty soon I'm thinking, you know what, I didn't realize that you know both geophysics and you have an expertise particularly in seismology, and you write really well, and you have an understanding of how apps can be used to either alert people about seismic shifts and seismic events, or potentially help us to track seismic events in real time. That's a unique skill. That's a unique expertise. Would you like to write a piece about that for my magazine? Would you like to talk to me? Maybe we could talk about putting together a project together. This is the kind of thing that's created in the moment. It's really, really amazing how hidden these opportunities are and how they can just come to fruition from conversations. Now, there are more freelancers than staff these days, and so that's why we need to be well aware and keep our networking handy, keep our networking skills sharp. And quite honestly, as I mentioned to you earlier, just like I'm doing more than one task, freelancers just in general do more than one task, they have more than one responsibility, they have more than one type of project that they're working on, and if they're smart and if they're successful, they have multiple clients, multiple projects at any given time. So having a good background and a good understanding of how to handle and juggle multiple projects, multiple deadlines is going to be absolutely critical for your success. Careers and jobs are fluid. As I mentioned, what I'm doing today might be different from what I'm doing next year, and that's fine. That's something I also like. I like the aspect of this field, of this landscape, that it is constantly in flux, that it is very much changing on a regular basis. I like that aspect of it. Again, I think that helps me to stay from being bored. One thing you do not need in this career is you do not need a degree in journalism, a degree in communications, or quite honestly, even a degree in science. One of the most famous science writers today, who's very successful and very talented, Jennifer Ouellette, she has written multiple books. She has a blog called, I think it's called Cocktail Party Physics. She's written for Scientific American. She's written for lots and lots of major magazines. She does not have a degree in physics. She taught herself physics and became known in the field as a physics journalist, as a physics writer, as a writer who has an expertise in physics. And she did that on her own because she loved the subject so much. So you do not need a degree in the subject that you're going to be specializing in, and you don't need a degree in journalism or communications. You can learn by doing, you can learn by taking your own training and by your own experiences. On the other hand, both of those can help you. So I don't have a degree in communications, but I work in communications. I have a degree in mathematics. I do not have a degree in physics, but I write a lot about physics and physicists. It helps to have the knowledge. It helps to have the background. It sometimes is very useful for the conversations when you're looking for stories, and when you're looking for stories and when you're trying to find good stories and good people that you could feature in articles. It helps if you already know the vocabulary of that community. It helps if you already know the movers and the shakers and the players in that community. But that's something that a good researcher, a good communicator can figure out, can determine. So they can be of assistance, but you don't necessarily have to have them. And I don't want you to think that right now you have to go out and get a PhD or get a PhD in geosciences to be a geosciences writer, or get a master's degree in journalism to be a journalist. You do not have to have that. But what you do have to have is an understanding of what your unique brand is. And specifically what I mean by that is, what is your promise of value to your potential clients? And whether you're working for a staff job or whether you're a freelancer, you will always have clients. If you're a staffer, your client is your boss, is your institution, your organization that you're working for. And you have to be able to understand, what is my unique value that I can provide, and promise to deliver that to that audience and to that collaborator or to that potential boss or client, and you have to continue to deliver that. I'm going to talk to you more about your brand in a moment. The other thing that a lot of early career writers and communicators sort of don't think about is the business end of the business of being in science communications. This is a business. You are going to be running a business, so you have to think entrepreneurially, and you have to think about the business aspects of your enterprise. Even if you're a freelancer, even if you don't incorporate into a company, you are still a business. You're the CEO of You Incorporated, right? And so you need to engage in business tasks. You have business skills that you have to hone, and you are going to be doing business types of activities to make sure that your business continues to grow. Your business is science communications, but that doesn't mean that you're only a creative soul. It's creativity, but it's also business. There always has to be an eye towards that bottom line. So you are constantly selling, you're constantly marketing yourself and your value to potential clients, to your bosses, to your boss, to your supervisors, to collaborators. That's something that's very, very important that you have to keep in mind. So as I mentioned, your brand is your promise of value, and this includes your expertise, your skills, your knowledge, background, experiences, education. Your promise of value is your promise to deliver excellence, dependability, and expertise in whatever it is you do. And believe me, when you recognize that, when you are able to articulate your brand, when you know what your promise of value is, your promise of excellence, dependability, and expertise, what that is, and you're able to communicate that to a potential client, and then you're able to demonstrate that by your services, by your products, by the works that you do, and then you repeat that, people begin to expect excellence, dependability, and expertise from you. So you become a known quantity in the field, and clients and collaborators and bosses will expect that when they engage you every single time, you will always deliver on your brand. You will always deliver on your promise to deliver excellence, dependability, and expertise every single time. And that's what gets you continuous jobs. That's what keeps you fed. That's what keeps your business growing. Because when you build your brand and you deliver on your brand every single time, you reduce the risk for somebody to hire you, because they know that you've done a great job, so they expect you will do a great job the next time and the next time and the next time. And they're more likely to go to you, having engaged you and seen your brand, and you've become a known quantity to them, than to start fresh with somebody that they might not necessarily know. And let me give you an example of how this aspect actually helped me work with a client. So I had worked with a client. I had actually done a speech for a particular client on networking, in fact. And I guess I did a good job. And so they also knew I was a writer. So a few months after I gave that workshop for this client, they emailed me and they said, "We have an article that we need to have written. Would you be interested in writing this article for us?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to." And I wrote the article, I delivered it, they liked it. They emailed me a couple of weeks later and they said, "We have another article assignment. Would you be interested in writing it?" And I said, "Sure, of course I would. I'd be delighted to. I loved working with you. I'd love to do it again." I wrote that article, delivered it to them. I guess they were happy with it, because the next email I got was, "Okay, we have 40 articles we would like you to write. Would you be interested in doing this?" And let me be clear, the number I just gave you was 40, 40. We have 40 articles we want you to write. They came to me. They could have advertised the job. They could have gone to other writers they'd worked with in the past, but I was a known quantity to them. I had already delivered value to them, and they knew they could trust me. They expected that if they engaged me again in this higher level, they were going to get excellence, dependability, and expertise. And so they were willing to take a chance on me. It wasn't really much of a chance at that point, I think, because they had already engaged me. And so over that year, I wrote 40 articles for that client. And it was just so much fun interviewing 40 different people for this article, for this series. It was just terrific. And by the way, if you want to take a look at that project, that was for the American Association for the Advancement of Science, so the AAAS. This was for their Science and Technology Policy Fellowship Program. And the website is 40 at 40. So 40 at the @ 40. If you Google it, you'll easily be able to find it. And it's basically 40 articles about 40 different fellows who had gone through that program in the 40 years of that program's existence. And that's what I did. So it was so much fun. And I was so appreciative of that opportunity. But they gave it to me because they knew me. They expected excellence from me. So that's something that really is an important aspect of building your company and building your science communications career. The skills that are needed to be successful in science communications careers there's a plethora of them. There's a diversity of skills. First of all, you need a subject area knowledge. So you do need to know a certain area or certain areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics and the related fields. You know, one of my areas of expertise, one of my areas of my subject area knowledge specialty is science careers. So I write a lot about science careers issues, and so that is my subject area knowledge. You also need an understanding of your audience, what their needs are, how they process information, what they do with that information, when they get that information, where do they get that information, why do they get that information, why do they need it from this particular method, this particular mechanism or channel. Of course, you need writing skills, right? How can you write and be successful in a communications career if you are not a good writer? So can you communicate the essence of the story? Whether it's a journalism opportunity or not, you still need good writing, very good writing skills. And the writing skills just boil down to the idea of, can I communicate the essence of what I want to share quickly and in a compelling way that engages the audience? I need reporting skills, and by that I mean researching the story, identifying sources, interviewing the sources, knowing how to interview them, knowing what questions to ask to get the information that I need, to get the types of quotes that will be useful for telling the story. I need story development skills, which involves engaging the audience, actually telling the story, organizing the story. Of course, I need pitching skills, which means I need to be able to articulate the kernel of the story, the characters that are associated with that story, what the conflict is, in other words, what moves this story, what moves the characters, and what the story arc is going to be like. Increasingly, more and more, we're seeing more of an interest and more of a focus on social media skills and multimedia skills. So if you can do videos, podcasts, webinars, if you can design infographics, this is going to be very useful for you as well. And by the way, for this particular webinar, I'm concentrating mostly on writing careers, so careers where the majority of the science communication mechanism that you're going to be using is writing and maybe speaking as well, as opposed to a photojournalism career, a career in science illustration. Those are other types of science communication careers that you can pursue as well. But I wanted to focus in on the writing side for this particular webinar. The other types of skills that you need are the business skills, the entrepreneurship, building a business, negotiating contracts, budgeting, invoicing, project management, absolutely time management. When you have 30 different projects going on at one time, you better be able to manage your time well. You better be able to manage projects and know about how to put them into your calendar, how to actually give yourself reminders as to what you should be doing when. You need public relations and marketing skills because you're going to be marketing yourself. You're going to be promoting yourself to these clients. You need quote-unquote people skills, meaning you need to be able to work well with others, especially new people. And you need a lot of selling skills. And this is something that a lot of science writers who are new to the field, new to the community, are not necessarily comfortable with, which is interesting because, of course, in science, you are selling your science all the time, right? When you write a grant proposal, you're selling. When you give a talk, when you give a poster, you are selling yourself. And I know somebody just asked a question about people who are introverted. And you know what? Even if you are introverted, you still have to sell. You still have to make people understand why your science is relevant and why they should support it in some way. And this goes for any type of science career. But yet scientists and PIs, principal investigators, and professors, they don't tend to think that way. They don't tend to use the word sales or selling. But that's what they're doing. When they write a grant proposal, they're selling their science to that particular audience. And so we can take the skills that we've gained as scientists and we can transfer them to this new ecosystem of science communications, where we're selling what it is that we want to potentially provide as value to that audience, to that client. And what I sell to my clients is my knowledge of science and science writing, my sharp skills in science writing, my knowledge of the subject material of science careers, for example, and my ability to communicate that kernel of that story in a way that will move their audience. So I have to be constantly selling, and especially as a freelancer, I'm constantly selling in a very real way because I'm constantly pitching new editors, pitching old editors and new editors. There's the soft skills aspect of it, which involves flexibility, being open to critiques, and having a desire to improve your skills. Don't expect to be successful and move forward if when you get your first piece back from your first editor and you find it all totally ripped apart and moved around and cut here and cut there. Don't expect to be successful if you run away and start crying in a ball on the floor. Instead, you should be saying to yourself, okay, this is where I can improve. This is good for me to know how I can improve. You need to be collaborative and also have the ability to work independently, manage multiple projects and deadlines. Of course, there's other communication skills associated with that, including public speaking, networking, a professionalism, meaning that you're very serious about your craft. You have to have persistence, persistence, persistence. I can't tell you how many times I've been told no by editor X, probably 10 times, and on the 11th time, he was like, you know what, that is a good idea. Let's do it. Persistence, persistence, persistence. And related to that persistence, even for those of you who are introverts, having the boldness and the courageousness and the guts to be able to reach out to an editor or a potential collaborator or a potential client who you've never met before, even seeing them at a conference or reaching out to them over email and saying, I'd like to work with you. I'd like to work for you. I'd like to write for you. I'd like to talk to you about that. That takes guts. And if you have that, you're going to be successful because that is absolutely necessary in these careers. So let's talk about the different types of careers that are available. So I've mentioned science journalism, and the ecosystems in which science journalists tend to operate are in printed media, which includes magazines, newspapers, newsletters, as well as online publications, as well as multimedia such as radio, TV, online videos, podcasts, infographics. Of course, photojournalists and illustrators are part of this too. Positions can be freelance, they can be staff. The titles can include writer, reporter, editor, correspondent, contributor, columnist. From one of my freelance gigs, I work for the American Physical Society. I write for the APS News. I've been a columnist there for about almost 10 years. That was a gig that I got because I pitched it cold turkey to the editor. I had had a relationship with the editor before, but on the phone I pitched an idea for a column to the editor and he liked it, and I've been writing that column for 10 years now. And my title there is Contributing Correspondent. That's my title at APS News. Tasks include researching the story, reporting the story, writing, telling the story, editing it, and repeating. Private client science writing, I do a lot of. The ecosystems where you could be doing this could be for companies, government agencies and labs, nonprofits, associations, startups, hospitals, labs, universities, even museums. They could be freelance or staff positions. And the type of tasks that were projects that you could be involved in could be reports. You could be writing articles for their publications themselves. You could be writing white papers or product specs, so basically information about the products that those companies, for example, put out. They could be marketing documents. You could be writing press releases, working on the website, doing podcasts, videos, multimedia slideshows. There's other types of private client science writing, including curriculum design, developing education materials, working for museums, textbooks, ghostwriting, speech writing, copywriting and editing, evaluation and assessment and survey tools. And then there's a whole other branch of this type of writing called technical writing, where you're, for example, writing the how to use a particular technical product. And then medical writing, where you might be writing about particular pharmaceutical products or particular medical devices. So that's a completely other subheading or umbrella area of science writing. I'm not in technical writing and I'm not in medical writing, but those are options that you could pursue as well. There's also science public relations opportunities. These tend to also be in the same types of ecosystems, universities, associations, companies, and so on and so forth. This is important to know what the job titles typically are, because in universities you typically do not see a job title of Director of Public Relations or Science Public Relations Specialist. Typically, the people who do Science Public Relations at universities are called Public Information Officers, or PIOs. So that's usually the job title. You'll also find people at universities, for example, who have the title Science Writer, but they're doing public relations. Other titles could include External Relations Manager, Communications Director. That was my title. You could potentially find Public Relations Director in some universities, but quite often it's the others. And the overarching goal for this type of career path or job is to build advocacy with the many different publics that your institution serves. So the tasks include understanding and presenting the organization's brand to the different publics, developing a media relations strategy to get the word out there, so you're collaborating with and pitching journalists and editors in different types of publications. You're producing press materials, including press releases, internal articles, podcasts, and other content that journalists will find useful to report stories about your institution and are also accessible and useful for the general public, so delivering material directly to the public. And other areas could include marketing, crisis management, outreach, community relations, internal relations, and website design, and even graphic design. And as a director of communications for the physics department, I think I did almost every single one of those other areas that you see there, including crisis management. We had actual crises that I had to manage, and some of them were kind of humorous, like when we were about to have an event and we found out that the room was also being used by a sorority. What were we going to do? And then there was also a crisis that was a very serious crisis associated with actually violence on campus, that I had to handle that, work with the internal communications team at the U of A to make sure that we handled it in the most appropriate fashion that we possibly could. It was a challenge. It was something I prefer not to ever do again, to be honest with you, because it was so upsetting, but it was something that I did. Now, outreach is another area that you could pursue in science communication. The ecosystems are similar. The types of positions are also similar. You could be a staff outreach specialist. You could do freelance. You could even do contractual work. The overarching goal is to design, prepare, organize, and present outreach events, activities, and programs for and to the publics. And the tasks generally involved event management, public and media relations, marketing, and quite honestly, you'll be collaborating with multiple departments. And then the last type of science communications career, and to be honest, there's many, many, many other types of science communications careers that you can pursue. I'm going to just today focus the last piece of the different types of communications careers that I wanted to focus on today. I want to just talk to you a little bit about science policy careers, because this is a very common quote-unquote alternative or non-traditional career for people who have science degrees to go into. They find it extremely fulfilling. They really, really love it. And that website that I mentioned to you that I had written for, the 40 at 40 for the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship Program, that was all about science policy. So if you were interested in science policy careers, you would actually get information from that website about all the different types of careers that you can pursue in science policy. The ecosystems are very similar, with more of a focus on government, but there are a lot of people who work for companies, universities, hospitals that do government affairs, that do public affairs, and their titles are Director of Public Affairs or Government Affairs Specialist. And what they're doing is they're serving as a link between scientific research and contributions and the public and the needs of the public. So what they're doing is they're trying to help craft policies and even laws that support science, support research and development in support of the public good. And that involves building consensus between different parties and organizations, bringing together panels of experts to inform policymakers about issues that are important in the scientific community, write and edit reports to inform about these issues, and prepare and even deliver talking points and speeches about these topics. And if you were interested in getting more information about science policy careers, I definitely would recommend taking a look at the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship Program. And also, in the United States, the National Academies of Science has its own Science and Technology Policy Graduate Fellowship that you could pursue. And by the way, AGU supports a few of the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships, so you could easily do that through AGU. So how do we launch our career? Now, one of the biggest questions that I always get from would-be interested, enthusiastic science communicators is, do I need a beat? And then the second question is, what the heck is a beat? So a beat in journalism or a beat in writing, when we're talking about that, is basically a topic or subject area that you cover. So my beat, I have a couple of beats. One of my beats is science careers. Another one of my beats is the hidden lives, or the sort of an overview of what scientists actually do. So I do a lot of profiles of scientists, of how they actually do their science and how they actually build their lives and careers and what they actually do on a day-to-day basis. And another beat, I guess, that I would have would be physics, because I do tend to write a lot in the physics space and in the hard science space. It's just something I really, really enjoy. So your brand, your promise of value includes what your specialty area is, what your beat is. And quite honestly, having a beat is a good way to distinguish yourself from the competition. You know, there aren't that many people who have a beat in science careers, so I have a bit of a competitive advantage when I'm writing about that topic or when I'm pitching editors. And that can lead to hidden assignment opportunities for you. So it is useful to have a beat, to be able to say to an editor, I have an expertise in seismology, I have an expertise in, this area of geophysics, or an expertise in the mathematics behind geoscience, or an expertise in fossils or paleontology, for example, or the oceanography, or the creatures. I love calling it the creatures that live at the bottom of the ocean, the microbes that are there in the hidden deep biosphere. It's really interesting to me, that area, and I've actually been writing about that too. In fact, I wrote about that for Cosmos magazine, that magazine in Australia. So if you can establish yourself as an expert in a particular topic, you will find a lot more opportunities, I think, for yourself. I wanted to share with you ways I've actually gotten assignments so you can see how I've done it. How I've done it will be different from other people. I'm sure there'll be overlap, but I can only talk about, in particular, ways of getting assignments, how I know to actually get assignments, and that's from my own experience. So number one, I've pitched. I've reached out to editors. Either I knew them, either I met them at a conference, or I found them on LinkedIn, or I found them by looking at the masthead of a publication. I reached out to them and I pitched them. I sent them an email with a new story, a new angle, a new idea. Or it might have been somebody that I had already I've worked with, but I sent them a new pitch. So the pitch is the letter, the email where you describe to them what it is that you want to write about. So I've pitched editors. I've also cold emailed editors, meaning these are editors that I've never talked to before, I've never had any engagement with or interaction with, and I basically introduced myself to them. I told them I didn't have a story right now, but I wanted to introduce my beat. I wanted to introduce my expertise, let them know a little bit about me, and if there was opportunities to write about X and Y, I would be able to do that. And I also asked for short appointments with them. In fact, just recently, I reached out to an editor that I actually found, I think, on Twitter or Facebook. And I reached out to her and I said, I love your magazine. I'd love to talk to you more about what your goals are as editor. Would it be possible to make a short appointment with you? I'd like to explore the opportunity to collaborate and hear what your interests are and expectations are and what your needs are. And here's my background. Could we make that appointment? And so we're going to pursue that. So I've gotten assignments, I've gotten long-term assignments from cold emailing editors and doing that. And believe me, editors are always looking for fresh talent. They're looking for fresh ways of looking at new topics. They're also looking at people who have expertise, looking for people who have expertise in emerging beats, particularly multidisciplinary beats. And so if you're able to show that to editors, even if you don't have a story angle or idea right now, that will keep your brand fresh in their minds. Another way that I've gotten assignments is I've become a known quantity for my beat and my professionalism, and therefore was assigned stories by publications I've worked with before. For example, there's a publication that I've written for about 6 years now, and every year they send me assignments. I pitch them too, but they also send me assignments, and they say, could you write about an article about X? Could you write an article about Y? Could you write an article about Z? And because I continue to work with them and always produce excellent material for them, and I say that meaning that it's clearly excellent because they keep coming back to me. So obviously I'm doing something right. They wouldn't hire me again if I sucked. they would keep coming back if I was doing well. So I'm doing something good for them, so they keep coming back and saying, would you like to write about X? Would you like to write about Z? And then the final way that I've gotten assignments is I've been approached by new publications, publications that I've never worked with, but because your reputation is going to sneak into nooks and crannies into the ether, and your clips are going to be known, my reputation has been amplified, and so people got to know me because of my clips, my reputation, my brand, and my beat. And so these new editors, these new publications reach out to me and ask me if I'd be interested in writing for them. And so that happened just recently. A magazine editor emailed me out of the blue. He said he had just taken over as editor. He was looking for writers, and he wanted to know if I was interested in writing for his magazine, and he had something very specific in mind for me. We had a conversation. We talked a little bit about it, and we're going to pursue opportunities. I'm going to be working for them, writing some features and different pieces for them. So I'm really excited about that. So that's a thing that I've done. And I see, by the way, that there are a lot of questions coming in, and I will stick around after we're completed, and I will stick around to answer those questions. Now, where do I find those stories, by the way? The stories that I write, the stories that I pitch. I find them from my own subject knowledge. So you always start with what you know, right? So you're an expert in geoscience. If that's what you want to write about, start by thinking about what are some of the hidden gems, the hidden stories about geology that are not getting out there. So I start with my subject knowledge, then I expand it out and I start looking at journals. What are the papers that are being out there, that are being published, that are being presented? What are the talks that are being presented at conferences? Whether I go to the conference or not, I'm still able to see what are the talks, so I get ideas from that. Associations often send out press releases. AGU sends out press releases. Lots of different associations do that as well, so I get ideas from there. I'm on lots and lots and lots of lists for press releases from organizations, from associations, from institutions, from even press release, they're called news wires, that provide press releases to me, for me to get ideas for articles. I subscribe. This is a really important thing you can do. A lot of people don't think about this. I subscribe to research magazines from universities and other types of institutions. And they send me magazines maybe a couple times a year, and I read through them, and I get ideas for articles. I've done that quite a bit. In fact, I got a great story I wrote about a physicist who is a cave physicist. That is his job. He is a physicist. He's a physics degree, a PhD in physics. He works for the geology department, I believe, at the University of Arkansas, but his specialty is cave physics. So understanding the morphology of caves and how they grow, how they work, what goes on in those caves. He is a guy who is a cave physicist. How did I find this guy? The University of Arkansas Research Magazine published an article about him. They sent me the magazine because I was on their list. And as I got it, I said, oh my gosh, I got to write about this guy. I pitched it to my editor at APS News. He said, holy macaroni, this guy is amazing. We both agreed, and I wrote about him. And I wrote an article about a cave physicist. Who even knew that that was a thing? I didn't even know that that existed. Thank you, University of Arkansas, for being smart enough to put together a research magazine to send it to me. And by the way, who wrote that research article in that research magazine? A science writer, either a freelancer or a science writer who was on staff at that magazine at the university. I get to know public information officers at universities and institutions because they can feed me stories. They can tell me what's going on that's happening under the radar at their institutions. And through my own research and networking, I've found different stories. And I'm always on the hunt for a juicy story. And that's a really important tip for you, that you should always be keeping your eyes open for different stories, different ideas. And the reality is that juicy stories are everywhere. But the thing is that most people just don't notice them, or they don't know how to communicate them in a compelling way. They don't know how to sell it in a way that another institution, that a publication, that an editor would be interested in, and they're related to that, their readership would be interested in that. So you want to be on the hunt for juicy stories, and you want to see how you could potentially communicate that in a compelling way that would excite and engage the audience. As we prepare for opportunities, we're going to need a portfolio. So how do we do this? We need to start writing. We need clips. We need examples of us writing. So if you're already on campus, if you are still at a university or still associated with a university or another type of institution, you could volunteer to write for the student newspaper. You could write an article for that research report, like the University of Arkansas's research report. You could launch a blog. You could contribute to a known blog. For example, Scientific American has a whole blogs network that encourages people with science backgrounds to contribute to it. You could approach the blogs editor at Scientific American, which is online, and suggest an idea for a blog. That would be a great clip to have to show people that you know how to write in a really articulate fashion, in a clear and eloquent fashion. You should write op-eds, letters to the editors, anything that you can do to improve on your writing skills and also get the clips. The journals that you know often have sections to them that you can write for. For example, Science Magazine has a book review section, so you could volunteer to review books. Science Magazine also has a career section, so you could volunteer to write a first-person account of your career path for sciencecareers.org. Your professional association. I wrote Lost, but there's actually lots of opportunities to contribute with AGU, and I'm going to talk to you more about that as well. You want to organize your portfolio online, and there are various ways that you can do this. There are lots of websites for writers. WordPress is a great, just basic way to launch a website. You don't necessarily have to have a website, but what you absolutely have to have is a LinkedIn profile. And you can use your LinkedIn profile as your website because it can serve as an online portfolio. But to be honest, to be truly honest with you, I think having a website as a writer is going to be, and a communicator is going to be an advantageous thing that you should pursue. I have both a LinkedIn profile and a website. It has all of my clips. It tells my background. My LinkedIn profile has similar types of things too, but it really helps to solidify your brand and showcase your work and showcase your professionalism, your seriousness about this area, this business, and this craft when you have a website. So I do think that it is something that you should pursue, but don't spend your concentrated amount of time early in your career on building the website. What you should be concentrating on is getting experiences where you actually can showcase clips. Do you need another degree? Do you need a communications degree in general? No. There are benefits. There are lots of science writing programs, science writing master's degree programs, and there are lots of benefits associated with getting, for example, a master's degree in science communications or science writing or even science public relations, including skill development. You get that experiential learning. You get access to that top talent. Those programs are often taught by successful, very successful science writers, science communicators who bring in their friends and colleagues to give guest lectures, to give talks, and give more information about how to access career opportunities, how to build careers in this area, and the craft of science writing. So you do get that access to those really high-level movers and shakers. The high-impact networking is just tremendous. It can demonstrate your dedication to the field and subject, and it can enhance your reputation. But quite honestly, in the end, decisions to hire you are made basically on one thing. Can you write about science in a compelling way? And I don't have a degree in journalism or communications, and I can write about science in a compelling way, and so I get jobs. I get gigs. I get opportunities. I don't need that degree. But if you really enjoy the subject and you want to get it, go for it. No problem. Pitching editors, I want to just spend a couple of moments on this. Pitching editors, the key thing when you send your pitch letter, your pitch email to an editor is who, what, when, where, why, and why should I, as the editor, care, and why would my readers care? So these are the kind of things that you want to put in the pitch letter. You want to let them know that you know your stuff, so you're going to demonstrate your expertise in this area. One really important thing that early career science communicators forget to do, and quite honestly late stage communicators sometimes forget to do too, is to show that you know the publication. If you've read the publication and you can show me in the pitch letter, if I'm the editor in this scenario, if you can show me that you have an idea of where in the publication the article would go, or why this would be relevant to my readership, or that this topic has not been covered in the way you're describing it before by my publication, it's been covered in other ways, and you even provide me with links to those other previous articles, but you're going to be presenting it in a new way that is important. If you can show me that you know my publication and my readership, you're going to really, really make a difference in me deciding to hire you. You need to get to the point and the kernel quickly. You need to show me why you're uniquely suited to write this piece and give me information about your background and experience. So you need to provide links to your clips. tips. But don't include attachments, because if I don't know you, I'm not necessarily going to want to open up a PDF from somebody I don't know. But I don't mind clicking on a link to a LinkedIn profile or to an article that you've had written in your newspaper on campus, your local newspaper, Scientific American, Science Magazine, or so on and so forth. When the editor says no, and they will say no, at some point they will say no, keep pitching. Don't take it personally. Come up with fresh ideas and pitch again, then pitch again, then pitch again, and keep freaking pitching. Did I mention to keep pitching? Do keep pitching. Doesn't matter if they say no. They're just saying no to that idea right now, and they're saying that no to that particular idea. Doesn't mean they won't say no to the idea in the future. Doesn't mean that they won't say no to a different version of that, that they won't say no to a different version of that idea, and they certainly are not saying, no, you get the hell away from me. They're saying no to that idea. So keep pitching. Persistence pays off. And let me talk to you now about some resources that will help you in your career. So the National Association of Science Writers is as I mentioned, the national, in the United States, the National Association of Science Writers, Science Communicators. I have found it to be absolutely amazing in terms of the benefits that I've gotten since I joined. And I only joined in 2009, and I cannot tell you how much being a member and being engaged with the membership has influenced my success as a science writer and has gotten me jobs. So to be absolutely clear, as a member and being a member has gotten me paid jobs, like that editor of Cosmos that I met. The annual conference, Networking Platinum. Editors go there specifically to meet new writers, to interact with old writers, to find new talent that they can bring into their organization. The NASW has an internship fair for students that they hold at the AAAS conference. They produce advertisements that they send out every week about jobs that are advertised. They have fellowships, travel grants, even professional development grants that you can pursue. They have databases that are so useful, like they have contracts, a database of contracts where you can look through the contractual language. You can even do a search to figure out what should you put in your contract, what should be in your contract, what should not be in your contract if you're going to be writing an article for a particular publication. They have a database called Wordsworth where members actually upload information about the pay rates of different publications. And there's lots and lots of opportunities for networking, not just at the conference, but through the committees and through different opportunities online as well. So it's really, really terrific. There's other types of ecosystems in which you can network to find stories, clients, and collaborators and promote yourself. Conferences, subject matter conferences like the AGU fall meeting, associations, regional organizations, LinkedIn, alumni networks. You know, I write a lot about alumni. I keep a track of alumni that I know from my high school, from my university. My first article, most recently, I just started a new feature that I'm writing now for Science Magazine, for sciencecareers.org, called Clandestine Careers. It's about scientists and engineers in very unusual, surprising, or hidden careers. And I'm writing this. I pitched this to the editor. She accepted the idea. My very first article for that column, for that feature, was about somebody I went to high school with. I hadn't talked to him in 20 years, but I kept his name in my mind. And I went and searched for him about 2 years ago, and I found out that he was the medical examiner, the chief medical examiner for all of the city of Washington, D.C. And he had a background in zoology and animal biology. And I pitched him as the first person to write about, and my editor said yes. And so I was able to reconnect with him, having not talked to him in 20 years, and then wrote an article about him. And he was an alum. I was able to find out about him, and that's because I continue to keep connections with my alumni networks. And also regional business and entrepreneurship and focused groups and events are useful, as are meetups, to find opportunities and to find story ideas. Within AGU, there's a lot of opportunities to grow your career. You can volunteer to work the press room or with the public affairs office at the fall meeting. If you're interested in policy, the AGU blogosphere, and specifically the website is thebridge.egu.org. They're always looking for student volunteers who can write blogs. particularly in relating to science policy issues. If you do have media credentials, meaning you have a written, a confirmed assignment with a publication as opposed to a private blog, you could register to cover the meeting as media and therefore get access to media events. You should pitch article ideas to the editor of EOS. That is an opportunity that is ongoing. I always see that the editor of EOS is always saying, could you pitch me, please? You could speak with the media relations team. You could pursue science writing internships through the public information group and through EOS. And within the fall meeting, there's lots of other opportunities such as Fame Lab, which is an opportunity to do TED-style talks, open mic night where you get a chance to really, again, practice your public engagement and public speaking skills, and there's even science communications workshops and other types of workshops relating to even doing science videos. Through AGU and its partners, there's the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship, which embeds a scientist in a journalism type position, like, for example, with NPR or a newspaper or a magazine. As I mentioned, there's the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship, and then there's another great website on AGU's main site called sharingscience.agu.edu. And this Sharing Science is the hub for helping scientists effectively share their work with broader audiences. And that provides you with workshops, guides, tips, and opportunities. So definitely take a look at sharingscience.agu.edu. These are some of the different science communications organizations that exist worldwide that I know of. There's also the Society of Environmental Journalists here in the States. In the EU, there's the European Union of Science Journalists Associations. There's the Association of British Science Writers, Association of Healthcare Journalists, and so on and so forth. There's also regional science writers associations in the US. And networking within your institution can also provide you with different ideas, or your alma mater. Speak with those PIOs, speak with those science writers, get to know what they do. You might even be able to volunteer to work for them, to pitch articles for them, for the department website, for the research magazine, even the alumni magazine. And certainly get on the media list for press announcements from your institution or alma mater so you can get a feel for what is news, what is considered to be news, and how is that communicated to the public. So some final thoughts. If you love, love, love science, and I got to tell you, I absolutely love it. That is the fundamental thing about my job that I absolutely adore. I get up every single day with a smile on my face because I love communicating my love of science to others. I love communicating the value of science to others and to showing people why science is important and why they should invest in it, either by money or by time or by energy or any other way, or why they should pursue degrees in science or why they should conduct scientific research. I love that. And if you love that too, then this is the career path for you, and you will be extremely satisfied and extremely fulfilled. No two science communicators are the same. No two science communications careers are the same. You have the opportunity to do it your way. And remember, it's your career, so you hold all the cards, and you hold all the power, and you hold all the choices. You can do it any way you want. There are lots and lots of opportunities, but like I said, most are hidden, and they are accessed through networking and brand building. It is truly fulfilling, and here's the final thought I want you to think about. Even if you are not sure whether or not you want to move out of science and into science communications as a full-time career, be aware that you don't have to have a science communications career to make science communications a part of your career. Anybody can benefit from enhancing their communication skills. If you want to continue down the scientific path and stay in science and continue being a scientist, great. I think that's fabulous. It's good because you realize that's what you want to do. And if you want to improve on that, you can improve on that by improving your science communication skills, your writing, your speaking, your pitching, your selling skills, and that will help you be an even stronger scientist as well. And we can always use more scientists who know how to better communicate and articulate the value of the work that they do to engage the public, to encourage the public to invest in some way and become advocates of that science in some way. We need people like that. So whatever choice you make for your career, whether you decide to go full-time as a science communicator or stay in science and incorporate communications into that career, I wish you the very best because you're in for a treat, an absolute treat, and a delightful, delightful career. So as we conclude today, I just want to let you know we have a couple of other webinars coming up. These are our tentative dates. Because you signed up for this webinar, you'll get information about this. We're going to talk about research projects in the fall, as well as how to work with a mentor. And with that, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to collaborate with you today, to work with you, and to communicate with you how much I love being a science communicator. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm going to send you an invitation to join my LinkedIn group. I'm going to send you some resources like a free resume template. Let's stay in touch. If I can assist you with anything in the future, please let me know. And I want to thank you for your kind attention today, and I want to express my deep appreciation to AGU for their support of this type of career development endeavor. And if you appreciate it, let AGU know about that as well. This concludes the formal part of this webinar. I'm going to stick around because there were a couple of questions. And please know that I'm also producing, not only are we going to have this as a recording on the AGU website, but we are also going to have a companion article that's going to answer other questions that you might have. So if you have additional questions that you have for me that I'm not able to answer today, I will answer them in that companion article, which will be posted on the AGU Career Center website. So please make sure to visit that site. So I'll stick around for any of the questions. This concludes the formal part of the webinar today. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and I wish you all the best in your amazing communications career adventure. Thank you. Now, we got a bunch of questions. We got a lot of questions. I'm going to see as many questions as I possibly can get to. One person asked, do you think it's important to have a personal website to sell your beat and your brand? And that's a great question. I do really think that what's more important early in your career, like I said earlier, is to have the clips, to have the experience, to show that you've written, to have the LinkedIn profile, and then later on to concentrate on those things first and then build your website. You could potentially do them at the same time if you have that kind of time. And it is going to be useful moving forward because people are going to Google you. As soon as you reach out to the editor, they're going to look you up on LinkedIn, and they're going to Google you to see what you've written. So to have it all collected in one place like a website is a useful thing to do. So I do encourage it for later, but if you have only a concentrated small amount of time to launch your career, I'd concentrate on building up those clips. Now, somebody asked another great question. What about science films? If we're interested in making films such as documentaries, how can we find agents or producers? Are producers like editors? What if we're already interested in making films, but we're looking for bigger markets? And thank you for asking that. I didn't mention that specifically, to be honest with you, because it's such a huge, huge field, but I want to give you a particular resource that's going to help you for that type of thing. First of all, there's a great resource out of Los Angeles called the Science and Entertainment Exchange. And this is a particular, really interesting organization. It's under the National Academies of Science. And what this does is it pairs scientists and science and engineering educated professionals with writers, producers, directors, storytellers, documentary makers in Hollywood and around Hollywood to help them incorporate more factual science into their stories. So the scientists basically act as consultants to help the filmmakers produce the films. And some of those films are fiction. Some of them are documentaries. So this would be a very good place to network. They have events, they organize activities, they send out weekly emails, so I would get on that list. As far as producing films, since that is a whole other can of worms, I'll try to get more information about that for you in the companion article I'm going to be producing. But I would take a look at some really good documentaries that have come out recently, and you could even see about reaching the filmmakers themselves to ask this question. So one documentary that, of course, is on my mind is a great documentary called Chasing Ice. And this came out a few years ago. In fact, I believe it was even screened at an AGU fall meeting. And it was, I believe, a duo, two filmmakers who basically wanted to see what was happening with the glaciers, I believe, in Alaska. Maybe also, I think in Greenland too. And they were able to film how glaciers that took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years to build and to grow and to collect, were retreated in like 10 years. 10 years or maybe even 2 years. I can't even remember the number. And they had some stunning visuals. They had wonderful story device in terms of telling the story. They had scientists at the heart of their story. It's a great example of a very good documentary that communicates the importance of climate change and what is actually happening and why climate change is something you and I need to care about and why the public needs to care about it on a day-to-day basis, and actually showing, not just telling, but showing what climate change does and did and does on a regular basis. So I would take a look at that. They probably have a website. I know they did a few years ago, and you could contact those documentarians and ask them if you could ask them about what they did and how they did it. That would be a really good networking opportunity for you. Somebody asked me, what are some examples of multidisciplinary beats and what do you view as some currently emerging beats? Great question. So the multidisciplinary beats are where you sort of take like math and volcanism or data science. It's not exactly multidisciplinary. I mean, it is sort of multidisciplinary, but data science is applied to different types of fields. Or the conjunction of geosciences, chemistry, oceanography, microbiology, microbiology, and sedimentology that's being used to study the deep earth ocean biosphere, the deep biosphere that I mentioned to you. That's the kind of multidisciplinary beats that I was talking about, and also an emerging beat as well. Another great question was, how and when do you suggest transitioning from a volunteer to paid freelance writing? So ideally, you want to be paid as quickly as you possibly can, but the reality is that it's like a catch-22. You can't get a paid job until you volunteered, so until you have those clips. So what I would do is I would start by working with things that are close to home, like I said, your institution's newsletter, your institution's newspaper or publication or website. Scientific American, I don't think their blog network pays, but so you could blog there for free. And as you build up clips in higher visible and more highly visible publications like Scientific American, once you have those, you could potentially go and start approaching editors to pitch them articles that you would be paid to do already. Now, quite honestly, you could do that very quickly. You don't have to wait 20 years. You don't have to wait 2 years. Going back, thinking back about my career when I was freelancing part-time many years ago before it became a full-time endeavor, I started by pitching local publications articles about things that I was interested in, things that I knew, and they didn't pay much. I think my first paid article was $50 for a local newspaper here in Tucson, Arizona. And I don't remember how many words it was. I think it was 1,000 words, maybe more. And that's a very low rate. I mean, that's basically close to nothing. But I wanted to get the clips. I wanted to get the experience. And that led to other clips in the same publication. And then it allowed me, because I had this trail, this record, it allowed me to pitch other publications and be able to produce stuff for them as well. So there were a lot of other questions here, and we're pretty much out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest of these questions, I'm going to bundle them up in that companion article that I'm going to be producing. We're going to put that on the AGU Career Center website so you can take a look at that. But if you do have additional questions that you'd like me to address in that article, send me an email. I'm happy to address them anonymously in the article. I don't have to mention you personally. I'll just address them anonymously. So with that, we're now going to finish up. We're going to conclude this webinar. I'm going to thank you so much for your kind attention, for this opportunity, for the privilege and the privilege and the honor for speaking with you today. Do connect with me. Let's stay in touch and keep me informed of your career, and let's see what we can do to collaborate in the future. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.